The victory at the Granicus opens a road, and Alexander takes it as a liberator. His reputation runs ahead of him down the coast of Asia Minor, and city after city throws open its gates. This is one continuous campaign, and it is full of wonders. A provincial capital surrenders its treasure. The greatest cities of Ionia fall. A dead oracle spring bubbles back to life. A Carian queen calls him son. His soldiers wade through the sea itself, and in an ancient temple waits a knot that no one has ever managed to untie. Every step points toward one meeting the whole enterprise has been driving at from the start. The first time the two kings, Alexander and Darius, stand face to face on the same field of battle. From the Granicus, Alexander marches south, and his name arrives before his army. Ephesus opens its gates. Most cities do. Then he reaches Sardis, the old capital of Lydia, a city at the heart of centuries of war between Greeks and Persians. The Persian governor rides out to meet him on the road and simply hands over the keys to the citadel. Sardis is a provincial capital, and its treasury falls into Alexander's hands, a windfall he desperately needs. He has to pay his troops and buy provisions along every mile of the route. In this he fights, as Alcibiades once fought in the Sea of Marmara, for the very wealth that lets him keep fighting. Without money, the whole campaign simply stops. Alexander leaves Macedonians behind to garrison the cities and to govern them, yet he presents himself as a liberator. He tells each city it may now choose its own government. Again and again the same pattern appears. The regimes that favor him are democracies. The oligarchies that ruled under Persia had been the pro-Persian party. Still, freedom is not quite free. The cities are expected to make contributions to his war, and the difference a Greek would feel between the tribute he once paid the great king and the contribution he now owes Alexander is not entirely clear. To Alexander, though, the difference is obvious. He has liberated them, and the liberators are old. His first real resistance comes at Miletus, the greatest city of Ionia. Miletus wants none of the new order, neither Persian subject nor one more of Alexander's garrisoned towns. It wants to stay neutral, and it holds a large force of Greek mercenaries. By now Darius has finally stirred. He takes the advice of Memnon of Rhodes. Make trouble at sea and pull Alexander away from the coast. A great fleet gathers, said to number 400 ships, drawn from Phoenicia, Cyprus, and Cilicia. Its orders are to stop Alexander at Miletus. For the first time, the sea itself becomes his enemy, and Alexander has never liked the sea. Alexander answers fleets with land. His method is to seize every port and every beach where enemy ships might come ashore, leaving them nowhere to rest. Galleys cannot stay at sea for long. Rowers need an island or a shore for food and sleep. So the Persian fleet falls back to Mycale, a mountain with a long beach below it. The Persians know this place well. Here in 479 BC, Xanthippus of Athens and the Greeks had trapped Xerxes' fleet on the sand and burned it. Now the ships of Persia sit at that same beach and can only watch, helpless, as Alexander brings his siege engines up against the walls of Miletus. Alexander storms the walls and takes the city. Inside, the Greek mercenaries know what capture may mean, and they do something desperate. They lay their shields flat on the water of the harbor like little round boats and try to paddle away with their bare hands for oars. It does not work. He rounds them all up. The greatest city of Ionia is his. But the fall of Miletus is only half its story, because attached to the city lies something older and stranger than any wall. A shrine where a god had once spoken and had then fallen silent for a very long time. The shrine is called Didyma. Priests from Delphi founded it long ago, and for a time it rivaled Delphi itself. Pilgrims came from across the Greek East to hear the priestess speak for Apollo. Then, in the old Persian wars, Darius and Xerxes burned the temple and its sacred spring, whose rising gases were the voice of the god, dried to bare rock. It stays dry for 150 years. Now, as Alexander approaches, the water begins to bubble up again from the stone. The priests sent word thanking him for restoring this force of nature and letting the god speak once more. And the god, they assure him, has foretold his success in Asia. Delighted, Alexander pays to rebuild the temple. He tries the same gift at Ephesus. Its great temple of Artemis had fallen and burned, and Alexander offers to rebuild it. But the Ephesians refuse. It is not fitting, they tell him, for one god to build a temple for another. For reasons we cannot fully see, they decline his money, and he has to move on without winning the point. It hardly matters to the larger design. All through his march down Ionia, Alexander wraps his advance in a cloak of religion. Oracles, omens, restored springs, and services rendered to the gods. Every city he frees with heaven watching. The conqueror is careful to look like a pilgrim. Beyond Miletus, Alexander climbs into the hill country of Caria, a land with a rare custom. Caria produces powerful queens, women who rule in their own right, an anomaly in the Mediterranean world. One of them, Artemisia, had commanded her own squadron in Xerxes' armada at Salamis in 480 BC. Another rules these hills now, an older woman named Ada. Alexander is drawn to older women and to mother figures especially. He meets Ada, they take to each other at once, and she calls him son. Together they turn against the next great prize in his path, Halicarnassus, the walled city on the coast that had been the hometown of Herodotus himself. Halicarnassus is a hard target. A Dorian city at the southwestern corner of Asia Minor, it guards its landward side with double walls, and it opens to the sea through a great circular fortified harbor, one of the finest in the Mediterranean. Into that harbor, Memnon of Rhodes has brought the Persian fleet, meaning to hold the city at all costs, and the man commanding its defense carries a famous name, Ephialtes, an Athenian mercenary, a descendant of the earlier Ephialtes, who, in the age of Pericles, had launched the great democratic revolution at Athens and led its attacks on the Persian Empire. Old Athens and the new Macedon now face each other across these walls. Alexander needs his siege engines. By now he has grown tired of the Greek fleet trailing him, which has done little, and he has never liked ships in any case, fitting perhaps for a man who lives inside the Iliad, where there are no sea battles. He has already rejected his general's idea of using the fleet as a true arm of war. So he sends the ships home, keeping only 20 Athenian triremes for one last task. To ferry his heavy siege gear, the battering rams and probably catapults to a beach on the far side of the peninsula, where a level road can drag the machines overland. In late summer, he hauls them over the hills and begins his assault. This is an age when the craft of building walls has outrun the craft of breaking them. Alexander tries everything, but each time he shatters the outer defenses, the garrison simply falls back behind the next ring, and he must start again. In the end, the breakthrough comes almost by accident. One night, a small Macedonian guard, bored on watch, dare one another to go and rush a tower in the enemy line. They charge in, alarms sound, fires blaze, and along the walls, Greeks and Macedonians wake, grasp what is happening, and pour forward to help their comrades. That reckless, unplanned charge carries the walls. Halicarnassus falls. But Memnon is too quick. Seeing the end, he slips away with his ships before Alexander can reach the port, and so Persian sea power survives, still intact. Yet the old hometown of Herodotus is taken, and with it, Alexander completes his sweep down the whole coast of Asia Minor. In the language of his propaganda, every Greek city is now free. The dream born in the 6th century when Cyrus first swallowed them is at last fulfilled. Then he turns east along the shore. He sends some troops inland, and his triremes carry the siege engines as far as the Meander River, before those ships too go home. Now Alexander does something no commander is expected to do. The proper roads run inland. The coast is no route for an army. But Alexander loves to attempt the impossible. He keeps to the shore, hugging the sea. Then he reaches a place where a cliff drops straight into the water and leaves no road at all. So the men strip down, lift their armor onto their heads and wade out into the sea, working their way around the rock through the waves. On the far side, they climb back onto the road near Antalya, which runs up into the heart of Asia Minor. There, Parmenio meets him, having marched the royal road from Sardis, and together they go up to the ancient city of Gordium. Gordium was once the city of King Midas, the man of the golden touch, who was in truth a real and very rich king, and whose tomb has been found. In its temple sits a strange object, the Gordian Knot, tree barks twisted together into a ball the size of a melon, a snarl of straps and ends with no beginning, binding a yoke to the pole of an ox cart. An ancient promise clings to it. Whoever can loose this knot will rule all of Asia. Alexander cannot walk past a challenge like that. The priest explains the thing. Alexander studies it a while, then draws his sword and cuts straight through. Only then is the trick exposed. The bark is not one strand at all, but many separate pieces whose ends meet hidden in the center. And the only way through such a thing is force. Blessed by Apollo at Didyma, and now master of the knot at Gordium, Alexander feels it more certainly than ever. He is the man destiny has chosen to tear Asia from Persia. Yet he still has not met his true adversary. He has not once laid eyes on Darius, and the prophecy names its own price. To rule all of Asia, he must first take it from the man who already holds it. That man at last is stirring. As Alexander pushes into the high plateau of Central Asia Minor, King Darius grows truly alarmed. This is no passing raid, no come-and-go adventure of the kind Greeks have tried before. This is the thing Persia has always feared, an invader driving toward the very heart of the empire. So Darius sets out to raise one of the largest armies the world has ever seen. He still commands the entire Persian heartland, and he calls on all of it. Soldiers are summoned from as far east as modern Afghanistan and Pakistan, from the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, from Mesopotamia, from Iran itself, and from across the Near East. Every province is ordered to send its men into one immense host, but an empire that vast is slow to gather. The very size that makes Darius's army terrifying also makes it late, and against Alexander, lateness is the one thing that cannot be afforded. Darius's slow master runs headlong against Alexander's speed. To buy time, Darius sends a commander with a detachment to hold a narrow pass called the Cilician Gates, the gateway down from the plateau to the coastal plain, and the great city of Tarsus. Tarsus is a rich mining town and a prize in itself. One day will be the home of Saul, later called Paul, whose letters will help found a new religion. Darius assumes a small force can simply cork the pass, but he sends his men too late. Alexander is already through the Cilician Gates and down into Tarsus before Darius even learns that he has moved. Alexander has driven himself so hard on this last dash that he overheats. In his usual reckless way, he throws himself into a cold river to swim and catches a raging fever. For weeks, he lies helpless. His companions fear he will die, and the whole expedition die with him. And far off, Darius takes fresh heart at the news. Alexander's physician mixes a medicine, but the camp is sick with rivals, and just as the king lifts the cup, a letter arrives from Parmenio. The doctor means to poison you. Alexander hands the letter to the physician, tells him to read it, looks him steadily in the eye, and drinks. The draught strikes hard, then heals him. Soon he is on his feet again. Recovered, Alexander leads his army east along the very road once blazed by Xenophon and the 10,000, the Greek mercenaries of Prince Cyrus half a century before. He comes to a place where the sea drives deep into the land, a gulf the Greeks call a hollow, with Syria on one side and Anatolia on the other. Crossing into Syria here, he draws close to the great king's own domain. He reaches Issus, a small port, where Cyrus had once taken on 700 Spartan soldiers. The coastal plain is narrow. Alexander reasons that Darius will never fight on ground this cramped, and they will instead block him inland, where the road opens onto a vast plain. So at Issus, he leaves his wounded and sick behind in a field hospital. Then Darius makes the one clever move of his whole career. He decides not to wait on the open plain at all. Instead, he swings his army the long way around the mountains from the opposite side. While Alexander marches on toward the interior and the road to the Euphrates, Darius curls in behind him, aiming to come up at Issus in the Macedonians' rear and trap them. On a map, it looks brilliant. In reality, it is a blunder, for Darius has forgotten the one fact Alexander has been counting on all along. The plain at Issus is narrow, pinched between mountain and sea, with no room at all for a giant army to spread and fight. Darius falls on Issus like an avalanche and seizes the field hospital. There he does a thing that will give the word barbarism its darkest meaning. He orders the right hands of the Greek wounded struck off, and the stumps seared shut with hot pitch. Then he sends these mutilated men after Alexander. He is copying Xerxes, who long before Asades had spared captured Greek spies and sent them home to describe the terrifying size of his host. So Darius sends his handless prisoners to tell Alexander of the immensity of the army he now faces, a war of nerves meant to break his confidence. It does the opposite. Alexander turns instantly back, marching the narrow coast to Issus, thanking his fortune that Darius has thrown away the open plain. The ground is so tight that Alexander's army has to move up in a long column, spreading into its true line only where the plain widens near Issus. The Sarissa phalanx forms the center. The right wing reaches out beyond it. Across a dry riverbed waits Darius, standing in his chariot at the middle of the Persian line, the ancient station of the Persian king. Alexander takes the right, his long spears anchor in the middle, exactly as at the Granicus, and the Persian engineers, always so clever, have used the delay to line the riverbank with sharpened, downward-pointing stakes, so that any Macedonian who tries to cross will be impaled before he reaches the far side. Behind them stand thousands of Greek mercenaries, the Persian cavalry, and a great mass of infantry drawn from across the empire. The fighting begins in the morning and grinds on most of the day. At first, the Macedonian infantry are broken up against the stakes and the palisades barring the riverbed. But in the end, Issus becomes the Granicus all over again. Alexander breaks away to the right with his cavalry, gallops up the slopes, smashes the Persians on their left wing, then wheels down onto the flank of the great force around the king. As those Persians pull away from the stakes to face him, the Macedonian foot soldiers finally heave themselves up out of the gully and across to the far bank. The same pattern that had won the first battle now wins the second. But this time Alexander fights differently. He is burning over the mutilation of his men, and he is a commander who always makes war personal. Out across the field, he sees Darius in his chariot, the living head of all the power of Asia, and he sets himself to carve a path straight to him and fight him hand to hand. Darius sees it coming. It must be like watching a wildfire race toward you on a hot wind, as Alexander hacks through the Persians closing around their king. That instant was frozen forever in a great work of art. Buried under the ash of Vesuvius in a grand house at Pompeii lay an enormous mosaic of this very battle. Alexander on his stallion Bucephalus driving through the storm of men, while Darius reaches out toward him, and his charioteer whips the horses away. Both Darius and his driver remember Cunaxa, a battle won and then thrown away because the challenger for the throne had been killed on the field. The great king's life must be saved at any cost, and yet nothing is more ruinous than the sight of a king in flight, abandoning his men to face the enemy alone, something Alexander himself would never do. Darius climbs down from the chariot onto a horse and races off into the dry country beyond the field. Alexander gives chase until darkness swallows the plain, but he cannot run him down. Darius escapes. He will live to raise another army and fight another day. So the two kings have met at last, and the ground at Ephesus has answered the prophecy of Gordium. The man who could cut the knot has cut his way to within a sword's length of the great king himself, but the knot is not yet fully severed. Darius has vanished into the dark, still alive, still a king, already gathering the next great army out of the vastness of his empire. The reckoning between these two will have to wait for another field and another day.